Pastoral Leadership, Part 2. Pastoral leadership is a cross-disciplinary approach using the shepherd as a paradigm for anti-fragility and connecting it to various concepts within the studies of social sciences, including economics, psychology, anthropology, and sociology. So to do that, we will not only look at the shepherd in the context of his daily responsibilities and his ability to adapt throughout the history to changing social and political structures, but also exploring the various heuristics that they developed over time, which is at the heart of anti-fragility. Before we dive in, just one thing to remember. Just like the shepherd, pastoral leadership is not a bunch of rules to follow. Rather, it is adopting a shepherd's frame of mind that has made him thrive for thousands of years because of the challenges. To get an idea of how to think like a shepherd, we will take a look at 2 anti-fragile solutions that the shepherds have figured out, and then see how those heuristics would look like in the pastoral leader. Similar to leaders, shepherds had to master 2 dynamics and interactions, dealing with the big picture or the large group, and dealing with the individual one-on-one. It's not only a different set of skills needed, but also has to be approached with a different mindset. The shepherd had to deal with what was called as the tragedy of the commons, which is a social dilemma regarding an individual's responsibility to others. The tragedy of the commons derives from situations in which one person takes more than his or her share of the resource. The commons means that all participants will suffer. This dilemma stumped mathematicians and scientists alike. But one scientist, Eleanor Ostrom, went to see what the shepherds were doing to see exactly how they themselves took care of the situation. For this, she won the Nobel Prize in economics. Her research took her around the world, analyzing the systems set up by shepherds in other similar situations where they have successfully protected their common pool resource from being depleted. She was able to identify similar components in the various different systems, which she filtered it down to 8 design principles, or general guidelines, which are needed to put in place for adequate governance of common pool resource. Clearly defined boundaries, complete congruency between appropriation and provision rules and local conditions, collective choice arrangements, monitoring, gradual sanctions, conflict resolution mechanisms, minimal recognition of rights to organize, and when there is multiple different organizations involved, nesting enterprises. Before we explore how the pastoral leader can make use of these principles, let us look at the other dynamic of the shepherd, the individual relationship, which can be seen in the process of cheesemaking, developed by the ancient shepherds, and which is still used today. Why specifically cheesemaking? Because it best represents what is at the core of anti-fragility. Without the luxury of refrigeration, there is only a small window of time before it starts to spoil. The shepherds learn through much trial and error not only how to preserve this delicate resource, but to do so in nearly any climate or region. Simply stated, the job of the cheesemaker is to take something that is temperamental and not only to stabilize it, but to make it hardy and long-lasting. There is no one right way to make cheese, since there are 100 types of cheese, and each minute manipulation at any stage of the process can change the end result. However, a good cheesemaker knows that at any given point, if the manipulation is done wrong, like too early or too late, too hot or too cold, or too much or too little of a specific ingredient, one can easily end up with a product that is at best inedible, or at worst, deadly. The most fascinating thing about this product, that no matter where it is or what type of cheese it is, they all consist of 8 basic processes that will turn the milk into cheese, with each type coming from a slightly variation in the timing and temperature associated with each state. They are setting the milk, cutting the curd, cooking the curd, draining the whey, knitting the curds, pressing the curds, salting them, and when necessary, a special application. So how does all this relate to leadership? The image of a shepherd and leadership has historically been linked, but now we see that taking it further, the shepherd epitomizes both components of leadership, leading the masses, as well as connecting to each follower individually. These 2 components of the shepherd is what anti-fragility is all about. In both cases, the principles are presented in a way that can be adopted and modified based on the local needs and the resources available. Leadership is about how to overcome obstacles that will inevitably present themselves. The anti-fragile leader does not get hit by big surprises since she is always engaging and assessing the landscape, allowing for constant small volatility, so when there is a major crisis, the system is already prepared on how to deal with it. This is in essence the spirit of the shepherd. Let's rewind a bit and look back at the principles presented and see how they can be applied in a practical way. Please note, each idea is a very broad topic in which a person could spend a lifetime researching. They are brought down here as merely as memes and only represent a small abstract of the subject.